So one of the things that we put together, we kind of have a meeting layout for the year. So tonight is construction, and then we took a survey earlier, and some things that showed up in the survey was people wanted to know a little bit about the how lumber, not really how it's cut, but the different ways to cut lumber. So we want to talk a little bit about that. So I'll talk about that, and then we'll go into how do you take a piece of wood and get it from, well, we'll maybe start a little earlier than that. What kind of wood do you want to start with? Do you want to start with stuff that's already surfaced down to 13/16ths? You know, so it's what you find out with woodworking is it's a whole bunch of planning. Okay, so and you really start your planning early on, and so we'll start with the wood. The logs end up at a sawmill, and actually, I don't know. The cabinet makers 100 years ago would go out and select their tree, and they'd look for a tree that would meet their needs. And a lot of times those trees are really straight, because if it's real straight, it'll stay straight. Okay? If it's real crooked, you put it through a saw and you make it straight, but it doesn't stay straight. So you really need to think about, let's see, when it gets cut, or you're going to select wood, you know, what do you want out of the piece of wood? Okay, so here's a piece of ash. Okay, and the grain shows up pretty good. So this is plain sawn. Okay. Actually, they'll talk about things. They'll talk about two different ways that there's really two ways, and riff kind of gets in the middle. And there's two different terms. So with hardwood, this is plain sawn. If it's softwood, it's going to be flat grained. When I say softwood, you guys know what I'm talking about. Okay, so softwood is conifers, and hardwood is deciduous trees. Okay, so you get a grain pattern like that, and the advantage of that is some of us really like that grain pattern. So another one is this is actually riff, but it looks like quarter sawn. Okay, with the quarter sawn, the lines are real parallel. Okay, so if I'm going to work on a project, and I want to, if I've got something that's really curved, and I'm going to lay down some veneer there, but on the edge, I want to cover that edge and put a piece of solid wood on the edge so you can't see my construction techniques. Okay, if I can find a piece of wood looks somewhat similar to the plain sawn, but then when I get out here, I've got some straight parallel lines. If I have another piece of wood that I attach to that, those straight parallel lines will match up and will hide themselves pretty good. Okay, but if I've got these cathedrals kind of going on, and I glue one on the front, then you'll see those grain lines in there. So thinking about your project and what you really want helps you kind of select the grain orientation. So if we look at a log, anybody got a sawmill out there? Anybody saw? So I need your help, because you're really going to be the expert. You're way ahead of all of us in doing that. So you got a circle saw, or you got a band mill? A band mill. So if you have your log, and all of your growth rings are growing around like this. Okay, they're going to put it in there, and so the band mill is going to work on the top, okay? And he's going to take off pieces like this. And those are plain sawn. Okay? And you're going to get something that looks like this. Okay? So, moisture content of a log, when they cut it, everybody familiar with moisture content? Okay, what's the formula for moisture content? In grape sols. So moisture content is equal to the weight of water divided by wood times 100 to get your percent.
You made it sound so complicated.
What's that?
You made it sound so complicated.
No, it's really
I
simple.
would have like E equals MC squared.
Really simple. It's just the weight of water divided by the weight of wood. Okay? And it can get, it's really pretty simple as to how you really calculate it, or you get a moisture meter. What's the moisture content of wood when you cut a tree down? Any guess? It was 30% to 300%.
What makes the difference? Why would one be at 30% and another one?
It depends. Are you gonna, when did you cut down the tree? Did you cut it down in the spring when the sap is all going up? Did you cut it down on December 21st, the shortest day of the year, when the sap's all in the roots?
Does it make a difference?
Depends on the species of
That's what I
tree.
was going to ask, is if the species.
So everything's different, okay? So when you cut these boards down, so this is plain sawn. Okay, and a lot of times they'll start with one end and then they'll flip it over and then they go into the side and maybe he'll take some pieces off over here. They'll flip it over and they'll take some pieces off here. So, you start off with the moisture content somewhere, and then after you cut it, you're going to sticker it. You're going to put pieces of wood in between it to let it dry, and you're going to reduce that moisture content. The moisture content is going to go down from, so let's say if you start at, I don't know, 150% moisture content, and it goes down to 30% and 30%. So there's a point that they call the fiber saturation point. Okay? So the fiber saturation point is the point at which all of the free water, so there's two types of water in wood. There's free water and there's bound water. So you have a little soda straw, okay, which is the cell, a long skinny thing. And in this soda straw, if there's water in the middle, that's free water. As soon as the fibers are totally saturated, it's fiber saturation point. Depends on the species of wood. So fiber saturation point could be from 22 to 35, somewhere in there. So there's always a range, but the number that they picked is 30%. So the shrinkage from 150% to 30% is none. Wood doesn't change size at all. Okay? From 30% to, let's go 15%, and I pick 15% because if you put, in Minnesota, if you sticker it and you keep it outside and you keep it covered, it'll go down to about 15%. Okay? You want to move that wood into your shop. Okay, so there's kiln dried or there's air dried and there's all of that stuff. The kiln dried will be a little bit more stabler than the air dried. Not very, a little bit. Air dried wood has been around for thousands and tens of thousands, millions of years, is what we did. So kiln dried is relatively new. That's just in the last century or so. So a piece of wood that is plain sawn, and if you look at the end grain, looks like that. The shrinkage, the expansion and contraction of the wood on the length of it is roughly 7.5%.
That's the width.
That's not the width.
No,
On the width.
no.
In this direction, it's half of that, 3.5%. And on the length, the longitudinal, the length is 0.1%. So when you take your project and you glue it together, the two pieces will expand and contract. They'll fight a little bit, but the glue will hold it together, and they'll expand and contract. So if you built a piece of furniture and you use the plain sawn wood like you have up here, you'll expect that that's going to grow and it's going to shrink, and it's going to grow and it's going to shrink. It's hygroscopic, it will never stop. It doesn't matter if it's kiln dried, it doesn't matter if it's air dried, it'll continue to do that. So as long as there is a change of moisture content in the house, which there is, then it'll continue to do that. So if you go to quarter sawn, you do any quarter sawn? Yeah? So let me get through my stuff and then you tell us how you really do it. Okay, so quarter sawn really means that the log is cut into quarters, and then you work with 1/4. And you're going to cut it like that. So the growth rings show up on quarter sawn as vertical lines, or close. Okay? So these numbers are the same numbers, but now you've changed them. So this is 7%. This is, 3.5. So quarter sawn lumber appears to be more stable. So if you've got a gym floor, yeah.
Steve, you got that quarter sawn wrong.
Yeah,
You got a quarter, you took that quarter and plain sawed it.
Yeah, I did. I cut it wrong. Thank you.
there.
No,
Why is it going to be this way? Green's coming across here. Everybody with me?
Well, I got my roof sold like that.
What's that?
That's more roof sold.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
That's more roof sold. You get some quarter sawn in the middle.
So the sawyers will cut a section out here.
Yeah, there you
That's quarter
go.
saw.
There, that's quarter saw.
That's quarter saw.
And this is quarter sawn. And the growth rings really are going like this.
There you go.
Yep.
And they'll take some out here.
Yep. Mm.
And those growth rings are coming like this. Okay, so the disadvantage of quarter sawing is it takes longer to saw. You end up with more waste, but you end up with wood that is going to expand and contract less in the larger surface.
And you also need really decent sized logs in order to get it and sort of, you can't really take a 10-inch log.
Yeah, decent sized log, what?
You need a decent sized log.
Because of that same
Yeah,
thing.
border.
What's a decent size? 2 feet,
20 inches or more.
20 inches or more. So, and where I'm really just trying to go here is to really help everybody understand that when you go and look at it, so the rift sawn, that's,
And some of it's a very fine line between rift and quarter saw.
so if you have wood, the green looks like that, it's usually referred to as rift. And you may get the reality is it's really a combination of stuff. Sometimes you'll end up with something that looks like this. So you got rift over here and you got plain over here. And sometimes you want to look for that type of green on the end grain to meet what you want to do.
We have some questions.
Yeah.
On your top middle diagram, you have a plain sawn board, and you say it's going to expand width-wise.
Twice as much as height.
What, okay,
This,
yeah,
this-
I understand.
this
7% of what?
The width.
The width
of the width,
will expand 7%?
7%.
Yeah.
So
Wait a minute.
So if it's 100 inches
That's not quite
wide,
accurate.
if it's 100 inches wide, it can move 7 inches.
So if I laminate boards together and get tabletop, it's 23 inches long, it's
Yep.
going to expand. That's a lot of expansion.
yes,
Between dry
That's-
season and...
that's exactly what we're trying to talk about today. It's exactly what we're trying to talk about.
So I made a toolbox in my shop, and I had some fancy bird's eye maple, and a cherry frame, and this summer, I mean, it's been up in my shop for a couple of years, 2-3 years, and this summer, those panels expanded enough to bust my joints apart. And I had them, and it was a tongue and groove, and I even pegged them. And it just broke that cherry like it was nothing. That maple bird's eye was only a 1/4 inch thick. And so I just got done fixing it. But I made sure I cut them down, the panels.
This tabletop is how wide? It's going to move that much over the year?
So where it changes, you have to look at your moisture content.
Oh, okay.
So if you start at 15%,
Yeah.
okay, and that's why I started with moisture content over here.
Yeah.
You bring it into your shop, and your shop is going to be, a house is about 7.5% the winter. okay? It's gonna go up in the summer, so in the summer it's gonna expand. So if you got chest of drawers that sticks in the summer, it's because it expanded because the moisture content went up.
Sorry. It doesn't expand a half inch, maybe it expands a 6.
No, but it's gonna, so, you start at 15%, okay? You take it into your shop, and it's gonna go down, and it's gonna go somewhere between, I'm gonna say 12, oops, I'll put it the other way around, between 7 and 12%. So when you build something, you kiln drying, do you have a kiln at your mill? You take it to what?
I bring it down to about 8%.
Okay, so kiln dried typically is between 10% and 7%. So he takes it down to 8. When it comes out, if he puts it outside, it's going to go back up a little bit. And that's okay for the wood.
Yeah, in the summer like this year, when it was, with all the rain this year, the equilibrium moisture content was about 12%.
Yeah. So the change is from what you started with. So if it comes into the house and it's at 8% and it goes down to 7%, it's going to shrink a little bit. But if it goes up to 10% in the summer, it's going to expand a little bit. So you look at that change in the moisture, and then you say, okay, now it's going to shrink or it's going to grow by so much. But the selection of the wood you start with is, I'm going to, I use the example of a gym floor. So the gym floor is all flowed, okay? And they'll expand and contract inches. It won't be parts of an inch, it's inches, okay? And when they saw wood, when you saw wood, the wood in this country is all sawn in quarters. So if it's 4-quarter wood, we're talking about 1 inch. It's 5-quarter, it's 1.25 inches. So if you start with 4-quarter wood, and it goes down to 15% moisture, if you take it to 8% moisture content, if it's at 4 quarters at 1 inch, it's going to shrink and you'll end up about 7/8 of an inch. So that's what you start with, okay? So a lot of places sell wood that is run through, they'll call it hit and miss, okay? It won't be completely surfaced, but it'll be surfaced. And they like to do that because they like to show off the grain, I guess, okay? I prefer to keep my wood as thick as I can so I got something to work with to start with, to get it down. So, questions on any of this stuff before I move away from that?